Welcome. Why do people switch or drop out or not go to church? So let me tell you what I've learned. The best book on this topic is by two sociologists who've written this book called American Grace. Robert Putnam, who you might have heard of from a book he wrote called Bowling Alone, about the decline of community organizations, and David Campbell. So in our country today, people have a higher level of religiousness and spirituality than in many other countries in the world. But we are in a context in which not everybody participates. In 1964, when I was a toddler, worship attendance in the U.S. hit its highest and most boring and comfortable high. It's like patriotic and part of the culture to go to worship. It's been declining since 1964, but it hasn't declined further than points it's been at before in the American experience. There have been three waves that affected us since 1964. The first, the retiring baby boomers are vividly aware of, the prolonged impact of the wrenching changes that shook up American society in the 60s and the 70s. A permissive, a little more experimental time, a time of conflict, a time that made worship attendance no longer the norm it was in 1964, or as boring as it was in 1964. People had more of a sense of autonomy, and they questioned authority, like the bumper sticker said, some of them, and institutions, all of them, and old norms. So that was the first big shockwave. And should the church speak to the big, important, and divisive issues of the day, the role of women in society, the civil rights movement, the war in Vietnam, awareness of the environment, and the idea that humans damaging the earth was an issue for the first time. People who were LGBT becoming open about it, at least in part, for the first time in human history. So the second big wave was a reaction to this first big wave, and it started really in the mid-70s, but it really got going in the 80s, and this was the emergence of what has been called the religious right, a new assertive alliance of a reactive, defensive interpretation of traditional faith with conservative politics that it didn't used to be associated with previously. The growth of this wave, a lot of people think it's still going on, or want to believe it's still going on, but it's been over, demographically speaking, for 3 decades. But as it fades and evolves, a lot of people, more secular people, journalists, and also religious liberals are not over their fear of it. But from the early 70s to the early 90s, what I call big box evangelical churches that use Las Vegas style show techniques and have good bands and really good videos, and I'm really jealous of their promotional videos to encourage people to come check out their church. They did a good job of reaching people better than less creative churches that were more rooted in the past. Because the past was really irrelevant, other than viewing the Bible as something that had not happened until the late 19th century as a sort of oracle, a perfect expression of the mind of God, like the Quran. But rejecting all the things about the modern world that this reactive, traditional, conservative understanding of defensive understanding of faith thought it should say. So they were technology friendly. They had effective programs to reach people and their needs, but it was cemented in the public's eye with being anti-gay, anti-science, and anti-evolution, and anti-whatever did not fit into a very small conservative box for God and people. And if you weren't a Christian, and maybe if you weren't the right side of Christian, you were assumed to be beyond God's concern, or you were going to hell. So that was the second wave. And that wave created the third wave because that wave has turned a lot of people off. A lot of the children of people who grew up in that kind of church have disaffiliated. And the third wave is what we call the rise of the nones, people who for the first time feel comfortable saying, no, I don't have a formal religious affiliation. Maybe in a previous time there wouldn't have been a lot more real connection for this sort of person, but they would have told you what they were raised as or what their parents or their relatives were. But now they just say none. They do have spiritual beliefs about God, and they do pray almost as much as people who go to church. And when asked by pollsters what's their religious tradition, they say none. They skew younger. They're not anti-science. They're not anti-gay people. So they're not going to be appealed to by people currently trying to stir up more of the second wave in American society. And so they used to be 5% of respondents would say none in my lifetime, to now it's 23% of all who respond to a pollster say, no, I don't have religious affiliation. So Putnam and Campbell, as sociologists, see the rapid change as the reaction to the second wave, not a rejection of faith or God, because only a handful of the nuns are atheists. And a third of them in any given year join a congregation. But they get replaced by others who are slightly connected to a congregation, who drop their affiliation and then don't become something else, and then they'll report as none. So the nuns are fluid, and they're open to belonging if they can find a congregation where they put down roots and find God in an experiential way, and other people in a way that are affirming. So this is where we live. And if you've grown up going to a historic Protestant church, in my lifetime, the market share of historic Protestant churches has shrunk from 29% to 14%. Now, the evangelicals will tell you it's because, we watered down the faith. And maybe that's partly true, but a bigger reason is for two big positive changes. One is the Episcopal Church was the first church where this happened in 1963. The live birth rate has been below the replacement rate for people comfortable with using technologically available means to limit how many children you have. And the other thing is half of all Americans marry someone from a different spiritual background than they are. So while if you and your spouse are active members of a church, there is an 80% chance your children will grow up to be people of faith. Only a half of them, 40%, will go to the same church you go to. That's just being an American. And so they will switch to a new chosen community of faith. And about 20% become nominal in name only for the most part, or nuns. I suspect, though, that most of the people who become nuns come not out of the deeply committed families where it's positive and the marriage is good and it's life-giving, and all the people at the church know the name of your kid and their acolytes or in the youth group. I suspect the people who become nuns are the people who are not fully here themselves to begin with, because the data suggests that's the case. 8% of all Americans who go to church switch congregations in a given year. But like I said, it's sort of unusual for somebody who's deeply committed, active, giving generously of themselves and their income to switch congregations. They may move geographically. They might have a marriage end and switch for that reason, but they don't just switch. Whereas people who show up and go to church on occasion, but you don't really know anybody and don't really do anything else, but they do come to worship, they switch at a higher rate. And in fact, if they don't know anybody and they don't do anything, they switch not at the rate of 8%, but 15% in a given year. Now here's the good news, is any church then that can attract new people at the rate of about 15% is going to grow significantly over time. So people want a congregation with a positive spiritual message. They don't want to strip down low commitment faith. They don't want a faith that rejects science, gay people, or religious or ethnic minorities. They just don't. We don't need to compete with those people. And we also don't need to compete with the Roman Catholic Church. Part of that exodus is the largest shrinkage of a church in recorded history has been the Catholic Church in the U.S. 2/3 of all the people who were raised Catholic in my time left the Catholic Church. 2/3. A third of them became nothing. So that's part of the rise of the nuns. Another third became something else. So it was the Catholic churches inveighing against birth control, inveighing against gay people, but also its abysmal handling of the clergy sexual misconduct scandal that was systemic, where it was clear that the church was protecting people who were sexual abusers and putting them in new congregations to abuse new people, and particularly minors, that totally turned off millions of people from participation in formal religion. So this situation we're in now, part of the turnoff is the alliance between religion and conservative politics. And in fact, there's interesting data, which is that in recent years, pastors of those kind of conservative churches have toned down the political message, particularly since 2021, because they've noticed that people they liked who didn't agree with their politics quit going to their church, and it mattered to them more, I guess. So we live in a fluid time, and today, in 2022, the most recent year that we have data for, it still lingering effects of the pandemic, but 24% of Americans attend worship pretty regularly. 24%. 8% occasionally, meaning once a month or more. So that, put that together, that's about a third. 36%, a little more than a third, attend infrequently, meaning less than once a month. And 33% never attend. So that includes the nuns, but it also includes people who would give you an affiliation, but they don't actually do anything about it. So 43% of those then who attend or watch a service at least once a month. And 25% of those who attend in some way watch services online or on TV. And 21% of use apps or websites in their learning. So the 25%, it was of the whole population. So 1 in 4 Americans do watch online. 21% use apps or websites as part of their spiritual practice or learning or prayer. And they're actually pretty cool. But it's interesting that if 43% attend or watch at least once a month, a little less than half have become online practicers of spiritual or religious participation. Now, people who attend in person think that sermons and music is pretty good wherever they go. And people who attend online think it's almost that good, but not quite. But here's a big difference. The people who attend in person, 2/3 of them feel a significant connection to other people in the congregation. And the people who attend online, obviously, that's not true. Only 25% feel that way. Another thing interesting to me is that people who attend online, 60% really just watch services from one place, wherever it is. And 40% meaning watch from more than one. There's not much difference in age groups between those who participate online and those who don't. And St. Peter's is, focused some people on social media as a way to hopefully reach people. The American population, 17% post on social media about faith issues. And 17% have limited posts from someone because of religious content of their posts. So posting is, if you see 43% attend once a month, it's a little less than that who post, because of course not everybody's on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever. But so here's how we are made up today. 49% of Americans identify as Protestant. 23% identify as Roman Catholic. And the nuns are around that number, 24% or so, or 25%, something like that. So there's not a big market share of Roman Catholics. Many people think the Catholic Church is bigger than it is. 1.9% of the population is Jewish, and they're one of the most respected groups today. We've moved as a nation among all but fringe people away from anti-Semitism or looking down on Jewish people. Mormons have slipped a little bit. They're only 1.8% of the population. So this 24% who are nuns are people we may be able to reach if we're spiritual. They really want spirituality and healthy relationships. And like I said, we're a pretty religious country. We have one of the highest rates of weekly attendance, even though it's just a little, it's 43% as regular, that in the world. We have more than Iran, for instance. The government in Iran has been a big turnoff to religious participation. And we are less weekly attendance than people in India, Brazil, Egypt, Poland, Indonesia, or Jordan, but way more than France, Canada, Australia, etc. So 38% of Americans report themselves to be members of a congregation, not just participating, a little bit lower than the number who participate regularly. 47% of people in the U.S. say religion is very important in their lives. For instance, in Sweden, 9% say religion is very important. 54% of people in Britain never pray. 44% of Americans pray before meals at least daily. So only 18% of Americans never pray, so 82 do pray. So we live in a fluid world, and we live in a world in which people will switch to find something that's a better fit. They're more likely to do it before they turn 30 than after. But the Episcopal Church has for many years been a very attractive destination for people who've made a conscious decision to change churches at an older age, meaning anything over 30. And so we tend to do well with people who found that their previous church doesn't work for them anymore. And we really could continue to grow in our ability to use technology to open the door of possibility for people. And we really can take heart that there's not a big irreversible magic barrier to sharing faith. And we can take heart that most Americans, as a diverse country, see value in other people's faith, and there being more than one expression of faith. Now, I've run longer than I wanted to, but I don't know that I know how to edit this, so I think this is just going to be a 20-minute video, not a 12-minute like I promised. So if you watch this and think there's stuff I could cut out and that it's worth editing it again, you let me know, and just realize this is much longer than the average Episcopal sermon, but not near as long as the average sermon in the big box church with the rock band and the Las Vegas lighting and the fog lights. Anyway, maybe out of this we will figure out how to make our own form of invitational video that will make people want to come discover what a pro-science, pro-all-people, embrace diversity of all sorts church of people who want to serve God and take care of the planet are like, and experience the Holy Spirit in this way that is not based on fear or anxiety, but love.